And we're back. So we're going to get right into the boys' grand final first, which is the Sandy Dragons against the GWV Rebels. I think what we need to say first is for the Rebels to make a first grand final in 27 years, that's very impressive. It's always a testament to the region as well that these boys don't even train with each other all the time. You've got guys in the southwest, Horsham, in Ballarat. So they're not in the same spot, and it's an extremely impressive feat. I was looking through the last couple of grand finals. I mean, it's always metro teams. Like if you take
Dandenong,
if you take out Dandenong, it's been like Murray. You know, a couple of years back, Geelong were probably the most recent when they won those back to back. The two grand finals in a row. So testament to the Rebels, and the same goes for the Dragons. That's 3 in a row, which is unbelievable to think.
If they do it.
I mean, we were there for their first one in 2022. Last year, they beat the Rangers. Where do you want to start? I think my biggest, again, like I said...
We'll start with the midfield, I reckon.
Yeah, that's not even my biggest concern, but okay, let's start with the mid. Where's it won or lost?
Yeah, well, I think GWV are going to want to make it a country dogfight in the midfield. That's the way they're going to win this game of footy, because they've got a lot of role players like Archie Caldo who can really, really take it up to Sandy physically. We saw Dandenong try to do that. They were able to do it for a quarter, but then they were just beaten on the spread, and that's a real concern for GWV. I think Jacko needs to continue his strong form, win the contested footy, be really clean, and I think Flynn Penry and Floyd Burmeister have an enormous role, because I think the one area on the ground where they have the advantage on paper, GWV, is in the ruck.
Yeah,
Flynn Penry will be up against Brodie Finlay. You'd back Flynn Penry, and Floyd Burmeister will be up against Lockie Voss, who hasn't played a lot of ruck this year as the second ruck. He's generally been as a key back, but he's changed roles in the final series, so they need to really exploit that, because if Sandy get on top in the ruck, then I think Levi Ashcroft, Murphy Reid, they're just going to run them off their feet like they did to Dandenong.
I'd like to see Flynn Penry get involved a lot around stoppage, because he's quite good below his knees. I think that can work to quite an advantage for the Rebels. And as I repeated last week, Sandy don't defend. The midfielders don't defend. That's their style. They're a very offensive team, a lot of their mids. And we saw that quite early with Dandenong as well. That's how they scored both their first goals. It's over the back. You kill them in transition.
Yeah. What was interesting, was that the game seemed to turn when Luke Kennedy went into the midfield, a two-way runner.
But even in that, though, he was still really offensive. It was almost a different type of Luke Kennedy.
Yeah.
So you've got a player like that. The only thing, I say that, but the Rebels don't have that style. They're not really an out-the-back team. So how do they combat, Sandy's offensive style? Can you find a way to counteract that and hurt them in that area? I guess for Sandy, who's that one player who they have a good day and you're doomed? And that's the thing with Sandy. Only one has to have a good day.
You could say anyone. You could say Levi Ashcroft. You could say Murphy Reid. You could say Sam Marshall. You could say Nathaniel Sulzberger. And you could say Luke Kennedy. We saw what Cooper Lord did on grand final day last year. No one was expecting it, but he'd be talked about a lot more if he was in a different team. So there's 5. Whereas for GWV, you think Jacko's got a big role to play, but that's why their team chemistry is so important. And it's been so impressive in recent weeks, given they haven't played together very much because of injury. And like you say, they don't train together. So that's sort of the midfield battle, I think.
I'm sure I'm making assumptions. I'm sure they'll come together this week, the Rebels, and do, a full training session as much as they possibly can. I asked the question of Ollie Hannaford. Do you move him into the middle in this type of game? You talked about making it a scrap fight. Well, he's that type of player you need in there. Sandy's mids are smaller. You've got Levi Ashcroft, who's 179. Murphy Reid is, same. So Ollie Hannaford going in there isn't really reducing height by any means. Is he someone you'd consider?
It's not a bad call. I do think they need him up forward because they need the scoreboard potency that he offers. We'll move to the GWV forward line, I suppose, now, and the Sandy back line. And I think... Ollie Hannaford has a huge role. I think he's going to get the matchup on Mitch Kirkwood-Scott. I think you called this as soon as the 2 games are over. It'd be great to see them go at each other. They're both tenacious and they both love a fight. But if I'm GWV, what I'm doing is I'm recalling Charlie McKinnon. I thought he was a real surprise omission for the preliminary final. I know he's had quite a few weeks, but I think what you need to do, if you're going to win this game, is you need to hope that everyone comes to play, and that includes Charlie McKinnon, who at his best is in their best 23. The reason I'm recalling him is because because the way GWV win this, I think, is marks inside 50. You've got Floyd Burmeister, who is going to stretch Sandy for height. He probably gets the matchup on an Owen Bader, because you're going to have Jonty Full is going to be on Adrian Cole. And then Charlie McKinnon, if he plays, is then going to have to take Lenny Hoffman, who they like being as that third man across. It really stretches the Sandy defence if you've got three marking forwards, particularly in the absence of Luke Traynor. So I'd be bringing him back, because do they have the potency at ground level if Ollie Hannaford gets shut down? I think the weekend shows that there's a little bit of a gap there, despite Harley Hicks playing a really strong game.
Yeah, I mean, there is a massive gap. And Oakley stopped that, and that's been like I looked back at the score. If Oakley kicked a goal, Charlie Richardson had a shot in the third quarter, they would have been up 59-30. And that was midway through the third quarter. GWV were really struggling for points on the board, and I don't know, is the weather meant to be good? Have you had a look at the weather forecast? I think it was 17 from memory.
Yeah, it's okay, yeah.
Maybe a bit of rain. The point is, I do agree with that sentiment that Rebels do need a bit more potency inside the forward 50. Ollie Hannaford will be shut down. And he's almost done himself dirty by playing so well. They're just going to go straight to him and say, "No, you're not doing anything today." I mean, Mitch Kirkwood-Scott has to do that, firstly. But
it could be Harry Oliver, to be honest, as well. But I think it would be Kirkwood-Scott.
That's why I think Ollie Hannaford would be better suited in the midfield, because he will have an impact. Sandy are likely going to put a defender on him, assuming he's going to be playing in that forward line. You put him into the midfield, well, then it spices up things. You bring in a Charlie McKinnon, then what? Who are they looking for? What are the forward and defensive matchups like? So it's interesting.
I guess just to close on that, if he doesn't have an impact offensively in the midfield, he's going to be able to shut someone down, and his pressure is going to be really good. So I don't mind the call of putting him in the midfield. Maybe it's something that, you see 10, 15 minutes into the game. If he's struggling, then, get him involved, because he's one of your better players. You need him involved in the game if you're going to win the game.
Well, when he runs out games well, so I don't... that's the thing. It depends on the flow of this game. If it gets to a point in the third quarter where it's 3 or 4 goals, you probably have to make that switch a bit earlier than, a bit later if it's closer. What's the last one we haven't done? Sandy's forward line and the Rebels.
This is the biggest area of concern for the Rebels for me. So Sandy have got 3 marking forwards in their forward line who all played Vic Metro, in Archie Ludowick, Bailey McKenzie and Harry Armstrong. And I don't think that GWV have the cattle or the height to stop them on paper. So I'd say you'd have Mitch Lloyd would go to Harry Armstrong. And I think he has been shut down a couple of times in recent weeks in matchups you'd expect him to win, against Riak Andrew and against Liam Callaghan. So I think Mitch Lloyd's got a really good opportunity to shut him down. I'd be playing Will Rantoul on Archie Ludowick. The reason I'd be doing that is he has had a quietly good couple of weeks, good, strong one-on-one, and give him the opportunity to do so. He's had an injury-interrupted year, and he really needs to show that he can shut someone down. If he can do it with his strength against Archie Ludowick, prevent him from getting to the positions he wants to, then that will go a long way. And then I'd be telling Ben McGlade that he needs to play a really strong game defensively on Bailey McKenzie, because Bailey McKenzie, if you just focus on the other two, showed on the weekend that he can just get off the chain and kick 6 goals. So don't give him any space on the lead, Ben McGlade.
If I take a step back and go back to the midfield, I think that's your biggest threat, more than Sandy's forwards. How do you stop their midfielders from kicking goals? That's the one thing GWV, I think, lack as well at times. Their mids don't really go forward and hit the scoreboard. You're usually good for a goal a game from someone like a Jack O, and obviously if Sam Lawler's in that team, you're going to get some productivity out of him as well. But from a Sandy perspective, Levi Ashcroft's kicking at least 2 on the weekend. You could put that down as a certainty almost. Murphy Reed's dangerous for a goal or 2. Even Harrison Oliver on the weekend kicked a goal. So how do you shut them down? I think it's what's that balance? How much attention do you put into restricting their midfielders' offensive threat, or do you shut down the forward line and their aerial capability? Well, that's the question actually to you. What do you put more effort into?
I think... it's a good question. I think the aerial battle's a big one, but I think it's the two-way running of the midfield needs to really clog up that forward line for Sandy and not allow the tools to get those easy leading lanes, but also it gives frontal pressure to the midfielders trying to come in and kick goals. That's the way I'd read it.
Before we go to our tips and big calls, Reece Unwin is one I think has a massive role to play in this game. We saw against Oakley, the first game against Oakley a few weeks back, he can hit the scoreboard. It was 0-5 that day, but he's one as well. You talk about Harley Hicks, you can bring in Charlie McKinnon, but I think Reece Unwin's one that if he hits the scoreboard, that's a massive contribution. And he's obviously had a poorer season that he'd wanted from a scoreboard impact point of view, but all he has to have is one good day, really. We'll move now to our big calls. I haven't actually thought of one, but if you've thought of one, you can say yours. I'll go through our Instagram answers first. So we asked this on our story. Reece Unwin, best on ground, 3 goals, and that would win the grand final, I reckon. Hannaford, best on ground. Do you reckon that's a chance?
Yep.
Definitely is a chance. Dylan Alexander. Foss runs out for GWV. could go back to his roots. Well, that's where he should be playing it based off where he's grown up. GWV by 1, that would be a cracking granny. And Flynn Penry, best on ground, one that could change the game for them. Have you got a big call?
I'll give 2 big calls. I reckon Floyd Burmeister plays a statement game that keeps GWV in it until the last 5 minutes. It's going to be a cracking grand final. I reckon Mitch Lloyd shuts down Harry Armstrong, keeps him at a goal or less.
Oh, I reckon Harley Hicks kicks 3.
Yep.
I think he's one that Sandy won't really put that much attention into.
Yep.
I just think he's one that will fly under the radar. That's probably my big call.
Yep.
What's your tip? Our Instagram poll, 78% said Sandringham, and that's 610 votes to Rebels, 168 votes, 22%.
I am going to say Sandy by 9 points.
Look, my real honest answer, the Rebels shouldn't have got past Oakley, and that was because the Oakley
kicked themselves
prepared.
out of it. Yep.
I think it'll be close until about 3/4 time. Sandy and they're big time players. We saw that last year. I mean, Easton were as good as them, but it was like 48 points at one stage. Like, they just blew the game out of proportion. They just have that ability. I just don't think Rebels have that ability to blow the game out at any stage, whereas the Dragons, they put on 3 or 4, that's your game.
Yep.
So I'll say Sandy by 23, but really excited. A great opportunity for the Rebels. It's terrific that they've got back to this stage, and you can put your money on it. The Rebels will have a better following there. The country people will come down and support them for this.